Okay, starting back up again. So, basically this mass migration of cars is going to contribute to the ability to be able to move, because if you could have a car, you can move. And so that kind of really is what helps cause this whole suburbia movement, and what helps cause us the movement west as well as urban, and then down south especially. Or I shouldn't say urban, I should say suburbia and down south. Now, this also creates the general culture of the car, which is where you get drive-in movies. This is where you get the invention of the drive-through and things like that, is because everyone is going to use and have a car. Now, this also contributes to a thing called Disneyland. Disneyland is able to be created because you're able to do a transient, you're able to move from place to place, which includes the movement of going to amusement parks, which is why Disneyland was able to be so successful. Now, we also have an upswing of Latino migration in America. Now, a lot of this is through what's called the Ranchero program, which basically allowed migrant farm workers to come into America in order to be able to work. Now, this is especially why we have an upswing in Mexican immigration, is because we have all these Latino migrants, especially going to California in order to work on farms. Now, this later contributes to the Delano Great Strike, which we talked about in class, because of this massive migration into America. Now, all of this in the 1950s is all about this new Red Scare, which is really the second period of Red Scare in America. Remember, 1920s, Sacco and Vanzetti. Now we have the upsurgence of communism because we're fearful of the USSR. Now, all of this begins this massive fear of communism in America, very similar to anti-Japanese, anti-German dissent in World War II. And we also start to fear spies in America. So the first spy that's going to be accused is Alger Hiss. Now, he really was a spy. He was accused of basically taking pictures of illegal documents, and he was found guilty. But this conviction began to make people very, very fearful about communists throughout America. Now, this contributed to the Rosenbergs, who I want you to relate to Sacco and Vanzetti. Basically, this was a couple that were accused of being spies in America. Now, these spies in America, allegedly, you had Julian, who was the husband, and allegedly Julian basically went and took photographs and helped find out what was going on with the Manhattan Project with the atomic and hydrogen bombs. Now, his wife allegedly assisted in that as his secretary. Both were found guilty, and they were eventually executed by the electric chair. Now, most people, they actually redo this this trial a lot, especially in New York, and they found often that the husband was guilty, but the wife was not. That's what they find most often. But a lot of this conviction really has to do with communists and this fear of communism in America. Now, this brings us to Mccarthyism, which is a key term. Red Scare is a key term, and Mccarthyism is a key term that I would star. Now, Joseph McCarthy was a senator, and basically he goes onto the Senate floor, and he has in his hand a piece of paper. And he's going to say, in my hand, I have a list of yada, yada, yada communists in the American government. Basically, I can guarantee that there are communists in America's government. And it creates this massive fear of communism known as Mccarthyism, which basically becomes a witch hunt throughout the government to find these communists. Now, people begin to massively fear communism in the government, because if communism is in the government, we're all going to become communist. Now, McCarthy's list, he never actually said who was on it. A lot of people think he just pretty much faked it, put it up on there, and he kept going higher and higher. The number started like 50, then there was 100, 250, blah, 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 blah. Now, eventually this McCarthyism actually has his downfall through the army. He ends up accusing the head of the army that he was a communist, and everyone's like, veterans, we like veterans, we don't like this, and McCarthy is pretty much booted out. However, a lot of people lost their jobs through all of this, through something which is called HUAC. So HUAC was basically a congressional committee, and their goal was to find the communists in America. Now, HUAC was basically, you can see right here in these pictures, an inquisition. They went and found government employees, and they did everything that they could to be able to figure out who was a communist, especially in postal workers. That's the most people who were fired at this time. Now, another example of the impact is through what is known as blacklisting. So blacklisting was where they found actors in Hollywood who allegedly were secretly saying communist things in their presentations. And so what ended up happening is that people began to fear that these people in Hollywood were actually portraying communist propaganda. Now, what happened is you have what's known as the Hollywood 10. And the Hollywood 10 It was a group of 10 actors and directors who they accused of underlying being communist. And these people were fired. That's what blacklisting means. It means that you're put onto a list that you're a communist, and now basically they're not going to let you be in any sort of movies or things like that. So pretty much all of this starts people not having jobs anymore because they are communists in Hollywood. And this blacklisting made a pretty big impact. It kind of shook up the Hollywood world because people started to feel like they couldn't truly say what they felt. And we're going to stop there because it's almost lunchtime.